Hello everyone, Charles Watts here, joining you for another episode of Inside Arsenal. I hope everyone is doing well wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. Lots to talk about today. Arsenal, of course, kicking off their pre-season tour a little bit later on, 1:30 a.m. UK time, if you're going to keep yourselves up for this one against the MLS All-Stars. They're in action last night in the All-Star Challenge, which we'll discuss a little bit later on. A successful Arsenal team in that All-Star Challenge with an American hero. How very fitting. But before we get to all of that, it's a bit of a special edition of the show today. Extended version with a person I'm sure you all very, very much aware of. A good mate of mine, James Benge from CBS. How are you doing, James? Thanks for joining me.
I'm very well, Charles. Thanks for having me on. It's bright and early here, by my standards at least, as a US employee. So you got me up early, but it's worth it.
It is bright and early. It is bright and early. How's the summer going? You all right?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, what a summer it's been, both from an Arsenal perspective and just like I've just been enjoying so much brilliant sport, and we've got the Ashes on in like an hour and 20. So when you say extended, I'm very hopeful we will be done quickly.
Why do you think we started recording this at 9:30 a.m., mate? 1.5 hours before the first ball is bowled at Old Trafford. Stay away, rain. Yeah, what a weekend as well. Got the Open starting as well. I'm heading off to play golf a little bit later on as well. So, yeah, good day plan. Lots to talk about, as I discussed earlier today. The MLS tour, the American tour really kicking off now. First game a little bit later on against Wayne Rooney's MLS All-Stars. But we're not going to talk about that, first of all, because I've got to call you up on something here, Mr. Benge. Now, yesterday, I don't know if you were joking or not, but you seemed to hint that you liked this kit. I'm going to give you the floor now to explain yourself in terms of what is good about the abomination, if you're watching this on YouTube, is in front of you on your screen.
More than the kit, I love it. I think it's really fun. It's a bit daft. So, I mean, I don't obviously, as you well know, much to the chagrin of you, I suspect, and a few others in the Arsenal press back, we can't go to most people buy their football shirts and wear them to the football stadium. We can't do that. We wouldn't do that. We're so professional. We totally turn up to the Emirates with just wanting to see a good football match. So I when I'm buying a football shirt, I am buying it for summer festivals. I'm buying it for not nights out. I'm buying it, to sit in the park. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, what am I wearing in August? Chilling out, couple of Aperol spritzes, and this is the perfect look for that. I can see this under an overshirt in the autumn months. I can see this with a loose fitting summer shirt. And look, I like my foot. I'm firmly of the view that anything other than your home kit should be as garish, as unacceptable and obnoxious as possible. And this absolutely is garish and obnoxious, and I love it. I love the video as well, mostly because
the video is good.
Martin Kemp, that man can still act. I know. It's like EastEnders all over again.
Martin Kemp looked dreadful in it as well. In that kit, he looked dreadful. It's not just like you will look dreadful, just like I will look dreadful, just like everyone else is going to look dreadful in this.
Have you seen someone did like, and I have to say it's so much better. Someone flipped the colors to like bruised banana shading.
Yeah,
that looks sensational.
I know that looked all right. This is not Arsenal. It's not yellow and blue. It's not the right yellow. It's just awful. I feel so sorry for those players. They deserve 200 grand a week for having to wear that. I have to say now.
One game in it, one win.
Look, these are some of the comments that were left on my YouTube channel yesterday. If you're watching this, you'll be able to see it. If you're listening, you can't. But we got was a very cool kit launch. Unfortunate, just for the worst kit ever. That kit is shocking. Worst kit in living memory. The away strip looks like a camouflage to enter Tiger territory. Gruesome away kit, and just as a professional journalist, just to balance things out. Look, there is someone down there, Emil, who says he loves the new away.
That's my burner.
So was that you?
No,
Emil.
Me and Emil are the only two standing.
I'm sure it will.
I'd love the third one though that we probably can talk about.
Yeah, the green one. I quite like the green one. I think that's pretty nice, and I wish that was the second one. I can't believe they've gone from the black kit, which is literally the greatest. It was such a nice kit, and you've gone from that to this.
I'm really anti black kits.
Oh,
I thought this was like a good black kit, but it's just sort of like you know, we know how long these things take, and I feel like the black kit is the equivalent of taking a year off or 2 years off in your kit design process because you're just like, will this do?
That's
I thought it was
the
a great
only
black kit, but
that is the only away kit that has ever outsold the home kit for Arsenal. Yeah, it was
I can
that.
see why.
It was that successful. I'll tell you what has made me feel slightly better about myself and my football club this morning is this.
Oh, I am reacting to that live. It's horrifying.
If you know, again, remember this is going out on podcast as well, so I have to explain what I've just brought up on the screen for those who aren't watching it on YouTube. It's the Manchester United, I believe it's their away kit, which is some very strange green and white concoction by Adidas, which does not suit Luke Shaw at all. Judging by
It looks like they've bought some jumpers on ASOS that they've then had to sort of brand. It's weird.
Yeah, it's made me feel a little bit better about my football. I knew you would like that Arsenal kit as well. Of all the people, I knew you would like it. And yeah, so you haven't let me down in that. But when I saw that comment, I thought, is he joking? No, he's probably not joking. This is a man who doesn't like Oasis. He doesn't like classic old school Chili Peppers. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. Anyway, enough about kits. If you like it, again, let me know in the comments below. If you don't, which I really, really hope is most of you, then you can let me know that as well in the comments below and let me know what you think of James Benge's taste. Okay, let's talk about more serious matters now, shall we? I wanted to talk to you about this story that you put out a couple of days ago. It was about Inter readying their offer for Folarin Balogun. You talk about Nicolas Pepe as well being approached by Saudi clubs in the same story. Now, I just wanted to start on Balogun, who's obviously the big centre of attention over in the States at the moment. I imagine he will get some game time later. Whether he starts remains to be seen, but he'll certainly get some game time in a game against the All-Stars. And again, given where he's playing, you know, all the focus is going to be on him. We've seen already the media scrum around him since Arsenal have got to America. Personally, I mean, I look at that, the figure you've got there in your story, 40 million euros. I cannot see that's going to be anywhere near enough to be able to get Folarin Balogun, and that Arsenal would consider something like that. But I mean, for you, when you look at it, what sort of price tag do you think, if Arsenal do reluctantly sell Flo, which might happen, I think probably will happen this summer, what price do you think is a reasonable price for someone like Balogun?
I mean, I suppose obviously it depends if anyone else enters the fray, really. And we should say, like, you know, even since this piece, which was 2 days ago, sort of indications coming from colleagues in Italy that Simone Inzaghi is really tempted by Alvaro Morata as well. So, you know, this may well be Inter's only offer, and if they don't go anywhere from that, and if that's indicated, you know, before it's even made formally that Arsenal wouldn't take that, then they may well just look at other targets, including Morata. I think the aim here is to really sort of squeeze some of that Premier League interest out there. I know that Crystal Palace and Brighton have looked at him because that's where the big money lies. We know that the indications are they would be looking for £50 million, or at the very least, if a team comes along and puts £50 million down on the table in front of Arsenal, they've got a good chance of it getting accepted. I think everyone has their price tags that they will put out there publicly, and what they might accept privately is a little bit different. And we know, you know, that really there are ways, if you're talking to Arsenal and making a bid as a buying club, that you can make that cash payment a little bit lower if you're willing to include a sell-on fee, or I think particularly a buyback clause, just to give Arsenal, well, either of them, just to give Arsenal a little bit of wiggle room. I think there's still a sense that even internally, no one quite knows just how good Balogun is. Is he a good striker in Europe's top 5 leagues, or is this guy a superstar? I mean, kind of going back to when we were covering him at under 23 level, I think there was some that were sort of saying, I don't know that he's got this in him that we've seen since. So I think there is still sort of a little bit of an unknown around Balogun, and I think that's probably why they're ready to cash in. To answer your question, I think if you swap that euro sign for a pound sign and put some compelling additional clauses around it, I think Arsenal would have to think about that long and hard. I don't know if you think the same.
I do, yeah. And I think you're right when you sort of talk about the club protecting themselves with some sort of, I think buyback clause would be really important in something like this, because we just, like you said, we just don't know how good Balogun is. We've not seen him in the Premier League yet. Obviously, he had a very good season in France, but I don't think that's the be all and end all in terms of how good a striker is. You look at who else has scored a lot of goals in France over the last few years, and I don't think it's a guarantee that he would come over here and score, anywhere near that amount in the Premier League. So there is just that feeling of the unknown with Flo. It's like he looks like he could be good. He's got this aura about him. He carries himself really confidently. He seems pretty ruthless in front of goal, even though he didn't quite show that against Nuremberg when he had his couple of chances. And I think, I tend to agree with you. I think if you could get 50 million, that'd be a great piece of business. I think 40 million would probably make Arsenal think if you did get a good clause in there. And I think we've all got to take into account his contract situation, which is like the big thing as well. 2 years left. Doesn't look like he's going to be in any sort of rush to sign a new contract. And so his value is never going to be higher than it is this summer. And so it is an interesting one. It'll be intriguing to see what he does in these next 3 games over in the States. I mean, if he goes over there, tears it up, scores 6 goals in 3 games, and is literally the superstar, that puts Arsenal in potentially an even more difficult position that they're in right now when it comes to him.
But it's really interesting the way that he is talking about this. And he is talking around this. And obviously, when you get these player quotes, as you well know, in the summer, you're kind of are trying to read a lot between the lines, because they are incredibly well trained to say very little, but they're saying very little with a thought in the back of their mind. And I thought it was really interesting that Balogun is sort of saying, look, this is all just left to my agents, my family. They're going to sort this. Not I'm here, I'm here to give 100% for Arsenal, and it's, it's up to them. I think he's acknowledging what everyone knows, that there is probably a transfer in the offing. But I did think that was sort of reflective of a player that it probably is wise enough to know I do need to make the move. And to an extent, that kind of hinders Arsenal's ability to sell, because we know that Balogun is extremely open to finding that place where he's a regular starter.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to him. He doesn't want to go back to being a substitute. And I think the simple fact is he will be at Arsenal. I don't think he comes in and displaces Gabriel Jesus. He'll get minutes, but, there's Eddie Nketiah ahead of him in a pecking order as well. And as much as Eddie gets quite a bit of grief, and he does get quite a bit of grief, certainly when I read the comments across my various channels, which I think is unfair, because I think Eddie's a good player, and I think he did really well last season when he stepped in. And he, as much as he hasn't absolutely destroyed the Premier League, he's proven he can do it in the Premier League, and that's something we're yet to see with Balogun. We all think he can, but we don't know that for certain yet. And I think that is a big, big thing. And obviously, we're not going to know that for certain until he gets a chance, and he hasn't had that at Arsenal. And I think Premier League clubs would be mad if they're not looking at him, to be honest. I look at clubs like West Ham, Everton, even, like you said, Brighton, although I think Ferguson looks like a pretty talent who's coming through. But there's some clubs in the Premier League who, if you're looking for a decent number 9 who could potentially, go on and be an absolute star, they've got to be taking a look at Balogun. It'll be very interesting to see how much the interest ramps up as the summer goes on. But I wanted to turn this conversation on a little bit now to Nicolas Pepe. Now, he's got a year left on his deal. As far as I'm aware, he has not even come back to England yet. He's not been at London Colney at all, which, I mean, maybe there's an injury, but even if there was an injury, he would have come back to London Colney for treatment by now. So it feels very much.
Sorry about this. I have to go to the get post.
No worries. This happened to me last time. He was on recording with Simon Collins the other day, and twice he had the postman knocking his door during this. So I'll just carry on without James for now. He's just run off to get his door. But yeah, the Nicolas Pepe thing, the fact that he hasn't even come back for training yet, for any part of training, even to be assessed or, go through any sort of medical tests, it just makes you think something's been agreed, something's in the offing when it comes to him and what's going to happen this summer. We don't know of any firm offers for Pepe yet, but you do mention in this story, and now there is probably no one, I would say, more on top of what's going on with the Saudi League at the moment than yourself, James. It's just been a string of stories and exclusives from you for a while now about the clubs that are coming in for players from Saudi. I'm ideally for Arsenal. This has got the ingredients of just being the perfect storm this summer. Saudi clubs coming in, spending big money, throwing big wages at Premier League players. Arsenal have a player here who they would love to get off their books and love to get some money for. I mean, it's a perfect storm, isn't it? And yeah, it seems with this story, the one time a club comes in with low personal terms for a player from Saudi, it seems to be this case for Nicolas Pepe. What is going on? What's your understanding as you know it?
So, yeah, as I say, it is. To be honest, I wrote this because I was getting sick and tired of people tweeting me saying, when are Saudi's going to make an offer for Pepe? And I kept asking the question because, I want to know. And I think you've laid out there, or at least you did. Apologies for me rushing off to get the post. The postman is normally about 3 hours late around here, so I don't know why. But anyway, yeah, as you sort of laid out there, it's a perfect moment for Pepe and a real opportunity. I wrote this to give people an insight maybe as to where things are, but I'm really skeptical that a transfer will happen at the moment. Like, I'm not ruling it out, just skeptical. At the moment, pretty much every Saudi Pro League club is talking to anyone that they know to be on the market to get a sense of what their salary expectations are, what whether they would be open to a move to Saudi Arabia. I know that a friend of ours, Chris Wheatley, has said that Pepe would be open to that Saudi move, and it's easy to understand why, given that, as you say, he is entirely not in the frame at Arsenal. I think we would suspect that if a deal doesn't come together by the end of the summer, that the conversations will then turn to a termination, something like that, because he's just not in the plans. And it's not helpful, I think, to have him at Colney when Arteta doesn't intend to play him. So, Saudi club, mid-table one. I am aware of their name, but sometimes you can't name these clubs for various reasons.
But is this one of the
one of the non-PIF
owned
ones?
clubs? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's not a PIF club. I've seen links with Al Ahly, to the best of my knowledge, and Al Hilal, to the best of my knowledge. Neither of them have spoken to Pepe. When you have PIF's money behind you, you can look a little bit higher than Nicolas Pepe. They approached him to get a sense of what his personal terms would be, and also to indicate what they would be prepared to offer. That was a 2-year contract that they'd be prepared to offer, but there was a very significant gap in what Pepe initially indicated, or Pepe's representatives initially indicated, would be the sort of salary that they would be after, and what the Saudi Pro League is willing to pay. I think we have to say, like, there is a huge amount of money in this, even for non-PIF clubs. A lot of them are backed by big companies or very wealthy individuals. But there is also the Saudi Pro League clubs are going into this willing to pay big for the right superstars, but very reluctant to feel like they are getting fleeced. They will throw big money at a Kante, a Benzema, a Mahrez, superstars, but they get the Premier League in Saudi Arabia. They've seen Nicolas Pepe, and while I'm sure they think he would be an effective addition to their league, they are aware that this is not a not a superstar talent like a Pepe, like a Mahrez, a Kante, whoever. And so, they won't pay over the odds, because there are plenty of other players of a Nicolas Pepe standard on the market. So at the moment, I don't see this as being one that really comes together. I'm interested what happens with Partey. I don't think that's like a move he's desperate on. And I know, as you reported, he still wants to understand what the future is at Arsenal, what his role is at Arsenal. But there is still interest there from Al Ahly. So that's one to keep an eye on, because at some stage, the PIF clubs can just offer you enough money that it becomes mad.
Yeah.
From a financial perspective to say no. Yeah, I don't see much coming to pass with Pepe, but we'll see. We'll see if he's willing to lower his wage expectations.
Yeah, I find it really interesting with Pepe that the fact he's not come back yet, he's not even, he's just not been invited back at all. And he's still wherever he is in the world, sort of keeping fit, training. I mean, it all points towards a contract termination at the moment, I think, unless something comes, like you said, out of the blue that really does tempt him. I'm pretty sure anything would tempt Arsenal, but in terms of tempting him, we know he's still such a big earner at Arsenal. He's got big wages for someone to take on. And if it's not a mega rich club from Saudi at the moment, you just wonder, where he's going to go. And we know that Edu's pretty ruthless when it comes to contract terminations. He's admitted it himself. He'd much rather just do that than have a player around that isn't wanted and isn't there. And it just seems mad, doesn't it?
And for that reason, I don't think the Saudi clubs are really thinking about paying anything more than a nominal fee, because they know it's hard to criticize Edu because what he has done around terminating contracts has been effective. But for the Pepes of this world, and there aren't many left on Arsenal's books, clubs that are interested do just think, and we saw this last season with your Kolasinaks and players like that, they just think, well, no, we're not going to offer a fee because we know what you'll do, and we can then sign them for nothing.
Well, I think he's basically the last, him and probably Cedric are the last two remaining players of that era, and that they haven't managed to do it with yet. And whether that happens with both this summer, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, how does it work in Saudi? Is there a limit to how many foreign players they can bring in? Because I keep looking at it and thinking, obviously, the big, well, I presume a big part of this is just to attract the attention ahead of the World Cup bid and all that. But you want to have a very strong Saudi team if you do host the World Cup, don't you? So you don't want a league that's just packed full of international superstars. Surely there must be some sort of limit to ensure that I don't know, is it 5 or 6 players in teams of Saudi? Is there something like that going on?
I believe they just extended those limits. It was 8, and I believe they are possibly in the process of extending the limits a bit more so that they can be more towards 10 or 12. I don't know what they'll do on the pitch. But honestly, I think at the moment they're not that focused on the on building talent for that 2034 level. I mean, we forget Saudi Arabia do already have some good footballers. I think for me, the difference between this and China is that Saudi Arabia have a good national team. They beat Argentina. They weren't they're not superstars, but there's a long history of developing footballers in that country. So I think to an extent their approach is going to be a little bit more like the Premier Leagues, where they say we're not particularly minded to limit numbers beyond. I mean, the Premier League you only really have to have 8 English-ish players in your squad, and we will then just challenge the best Saudi players to get their game time and hope that playing alongside and against the Benzema's, Ruben Neves', Ronaldo's of the world brings out the best in them. But look, this has all been made up on the fly, mate. It's very kind of you to say that about my reporting, but you hear so many things that you're just like, what? And there's so much stuff I haven't been able to share, mostly because I think it's just absolutely mad. And yet I always am like, I've thought stuff is mad before, and it's all happened. So it's a crazy plan that's being kind of put together on the fly because it's a bit of fun, because Ronaldo was a success for them. But I don't necessarily think there's much in the way of a guiding vision here of what they're trying to do. They just see lots of cool players on the market and decide they want to buy them.
You've already touched on one of those players potentially being Thomas Partey, who isn't out in the States but is flying out very soon to join up with Arsenal. Now, my take on Thomas is that he is not a player that Arsenal actively sort of trying to shove out the door this summer, but should something really tempting arrive, that it would be something they would consider. And I don't think that's the case of just purely for Thomas Partey. I think that's the case for quite a few members in the squad who aren't a group in that sort of untouchables group, who I'm sure we can all figure out who are the untouchables in the Arsenal squad. But everyone else, I think if a really tempting offer came in, the club would consider it. And that's where Thomas falls at the moment. Personally, I don't want to see him go. I think, and I've said this on previous episodes, I think if you've got a squad in the midfield that contains Thomas Partey and Declan Rice and Jorginho and those sort of players, you're just in such a strong position in terms of what you can do, how you can change things up for certain games. I think, obviously everyone looks at Declan Rice and think he's coming in to play that number 6 role, and I think he will. But I think if you've got Thomas and Declan Rice there, if you go to an Etihad, and I mentioned this yesterday, you go to Man City or something like that, and you can play Thomas as 6, and you can play Declan Rice as an 8 with Odegaard. You've got a lot of strength in that midfield for those big away games that would make Arsenal a very, very tough proposition. So I absolutely, from a footballing point of view, I think Thomas should absolutely 100% stay. From a business point of view, I can understand it if a really good offer comes in for a 30-year-old with 2 years left on his deal who, let's face it, is injury prone. It would be a tempting offer from a business point of view, but from an Arsenal point of view, I think you keep him in the squad. I don't know if you agree with me there.
I completely and wholeheartedly agree. And I think, the presence of Declan Rice probably allows you to get a better version of Partey when he plays. Like you, I love the idea of going to the Etihad or going to Old Trafford and playing that midfield 2 of Partey and Rice and just saying, yeah, break us down, and don't worry, when we get the ball off you, we can drive right through you. I think Partey could even do a good job as an 8. We think of him and he is an excellent ball winner, but really, one of his great qualities is his eye for a pass. I think Partey could come in and be an 8 in some games, like you say. Rice could be the 8, but and also, who do you sign to replace Partey? Because names like a Romeo Lavia, I'm not saying this is a target or anything, but are maybe not players that can come in and just do a job for you. One of the joys of having a Jorginho in your squad is you kind of know, even if he's not played for 2 or 3 weeks, you can be pretty confident you'll get a 7 out of 10 from him. I think it's really hard investing in young players as squad players and trusting that they will develop if they're not going to be playing 30 Premier League games a season.
Well, we've seen that with Sambi, haven't we? I mean, Sambi's a good player. He's a tidy player, but he just hasn't had the minutes to really impress. And then his confidence clearly took a hit because he wasn't playing, and he's just gone into his shell a little bit, and the personality's just disappeared from his game. And that happens with young players if they're not playing.
Exactly. Whereas Partey, I think, fewer minutes in Partey's legs gets you a much better version of him, doesn't it? And I would like you, if someone wants to come along and give Arsenal all of their money back, then actually maybe you can do, because you can do interesting things then, can't you? You could get in a player of Partey's age and get a much younger player, maybe a player that you loan out or whatever, and build that way. But let's say, I've heard the same. Arsenal not rushing. If you want to offer them big money, they'll talk, but they're not really pushing Partey out the door.
Yeah, I think that's a wise move. To be honest, it'll be interesting to see if he does come in this US tour, when he's going to play. Obviously, first game is tonight. Early, are you staying up for this one, Ben? Are you going to be watching this at 1:30 in the morning?
Absolutely not. No way.
No. I've got to say, I don't think I am either, which is totally unprofessional. But 1:30 in the morning, 2 young kids. Nah, it's too early for me. Too early for me. I think you've got to have. It's only on Apple as well. Arsenal aren't even streaming it, are they? You've got to have like the Apple season pass.
No, you've got to have the Apple TV. I don't know if you. I mean, like, I think you can get a free trial. People watching, listening, you can get a free trial.
Does that come with just having Apple TV, or do you have to have Apple TV and then buy an Apple TV pass?
I think you have to buy an MLS thing on top. But then I keep getting it. Have you watched Hijack? I've gone on a total tangent here. Very good.
Only reason I haven't watched that is because we're flying to Portugal in a couple of weeks, and my missus doesn't want to watch a plane thing before we fly to Portugal. So we will watch it when we get back. So don't spoiler me, by the way, on it.
But anyway, yeah, I think you need certainly in America, you need to pay a bit extra for your MLS access. And there is, even as someone that works in American football media, there's absolutely no way I would pay to watch MLS football. Even Lionel Messi, it's just not for me. I find it hard enough to keep up with Europe's top 5 leagues. I'm not interested in a league that probably isn't quite as good as the Championship.
Yeah, don't say that. You work for CBS. You can't say that.
But we don't have the rights, so I can slag it off as much as I want.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, so you didn't get to see the challenge, the skills challenge yesterday. Austin Trusty, the hero for Arsenal. I mean, it's written in the stars, isn't it? Hitting the crossbar to win it for Arsenal at the end. So yeah, I have to admit, I have no idea about the skills challenge. I did a show yesterday with Ryan Tolmich, who's Goals American correspondent. He did run me through what was going on. And yeah, Arsenal came out on top. I think a few like I think Havertz was involved, wasn't he? Balogun, and you got points for shooting for I don't know, but anyway, Arsenal won. I don't think we need to waste too much time talking about what happened in the skills challenge. I think the important thing was that Austin Trusty, look, all smiles. He got his big moment. He hit the crossbar. All the fireworks went off, and Arsenal celebrated. But the big that kit, I can't even. Honestly, just bring up the pictures of it in that kit. In that,
I have to say, Declan looks dreadful in it. It looks awful.
Everyone's going to look dreadful in it. Benge. It's just a dreadful, dreadful thing that should not be put on humanity. But anyway, the game tonight, I mean, it's going to be Declan Rice trained yesterday, which was good because I think the day before he was just on the exercise bikes on the side of the training pitch, and it was like, oh, is he going to feature in this game? But it looks like we might get our first sort of glimpses of Declan Rice in an Arsenal shirt, if I call it.
Now I do want to stay up.
Yeah, just to see that. I presume if he comes on, it'll be in the second half. He'll get probably 20 or so minutes. Mikel will go pretty strong, I imagine, for the first half. We saw the lineup he went with in Nuremberg. I imagine it's going to be pretty similar. Hopefully Martin Odegaard won't get injured in the warm-up this time, so we'll get to see him play. And this is going to be quite an interesting game because the All-Stars do take it seriously. It's going to be a competitive match. I've seen in the past, I remember Pep Guardiola really complaining that some of the tackles that were going in on his Bayern Munich team when they were in the All-Stars game. So Arsenal are going to have to be on this. It won't be like the Nuremberg friendly. This is going to be a proper competitive match.
And Arsenal played in it before. I think it was back in sort of 2016, 2017. I seem to remember Didier Drogba played, and if he played, he scored.
He did score.
Yes.
Surprise.
Was Senderos playing? I have to assume so. Yeah, like, this is I know we think of this as probably the least significant friendly that Arsenal are going to play on the US tour. But for the guys that are involved in this from an MLS side, it is a big honor. It's a chance to sort of stake your name as one of the league's superstars. And I think these players will all be very conscious of the fact that with Lionel Messi having literally just signed on, was it Saturday or Sunday, that there are a lot more eyeballs probably on this MLS All-Star game than many previously. Certainly that's the sense I get from talking to my US colleagues. It is going to drive interest in MLS. I'm sure that the announcement came then partly to get people watching All-Star game and get people watching Leagues Cup and all that stuff. So yeah, these guys have got a point to prove more so than Arsenal. Like you, I think we will see a strong lineup first half, and then you bring in some of those summer signings. I'm sure we'll see a bit of Timber as well. Because am I right in saying he did train 2 days ago as well as yesterday?
He was.
I'm really excited I'm really excited to see him. I know the talk is really about him as a right back. I do want to see if in preseason at all, Arteta does with him what Pep does with someone like John Stones. It's a quality like you could get out of Timber. And one of the great things about the Arsenal back line, and this is aided by having Declan Rice, a player who has played centre back, is there are so many different ways you can reposition players when you have possession and when you're doing build up. So I'm really looking forward to whether I watch it tomorrow morning, probably, but just seeing what he does with Timber over the coming weeks. And yes, of course, we were speaking about this before the end of the season. I don't remember a buzz about an Arsenal signing like Declan Rice. Just actually that excitement to see him pull on a jersey and enter the pitch. That's Ozil-esque. I think you and I would agree. This is a bigger signing even than Ozil. Going back to someone like Sol Campbell for comparable buzz and excitement. And yeah, I can't wait to see this guy in an Arsenal shirt.
I agree. I think it's the biggest signing since Sol. I think the only one since then that kind of compare in terms of the excitement, obviously Ozil, which was just a really special day signing him. What that meant and kind of signaled the end of the no money era, basically, wasn't it? And then when Sanchez came in, that was really exciting after the World Cup he'd had. It was great. But I think in terms of on and off the pitch, what this signing represents for Arsenal, it's so big, and it just reminds me so much of the Sol Campbell signing. Obviously, that was a signing that ushered in an incredible few years for Arsenal. Hopefully, this does similar. But I think the signings, like you talked about there, Timber and even Havertz to some respect as well, it's I just think these three additions, they make Arsenal so much more unpredictable now. That gives Mikel so many more options that he didn't have in terms of changing things up. Like you said, with Timber, he can be a right back, he can be a right-sided centre-back, he can be in midfield. Declan Rice, you can play him as a 6, you can play him as an 8. Havertz, you can play him pretty much anywhere that you decide. It just gives Mikel a chance to be really unpredictable. I don't think anyone's going to go into an Arsenal match now, any opposition manager or opposition team, and know for certain what they're going to be facing and what sort of system they're going to be facing and who's going to be playing where. Whereas last season, I think we all know we could have sat there with a blindfold on and pointed to exactly where every single player was going to be. And ultimately, that kind of led a little bit to Arsenal's downfall. I think they just became a little bit too predictable and over that running, and this completely changes that. I mean, I think it's really, really exciting, and I can't wait to see how it all progresses. And I spoke to Yap Stam about Jurrien Timber, and he knows him quite a bit. He came through. Yap was working in the youth setup at Ajax when Timber was coming through, although they'd never actually worked together, but he knows him as a person as well. And I came away from that conversation thinking it's a really, really smart piece of business, and it's going to give Mikel so much. And his character is supposed to be very, very good as well. So, yeah, I think a lot of focus, understandably, has been on Declan because of the price and who he is. But I think the Timber signing is a really, really exciting one for Arsenal, and it gives them a lot of options. All right. We've been talking for a while now, so we're going to move on to some questions before we wrap things up. Certainly all very aware of the fact it's 10:15. We're now 45 minutes away from the first ball being bowled in the Ashes.
I'll keep an eye out for the toss as well, don't worry.
Yeah. So let's quickly move on to one from Justin here, who very nice. He says, big fan of the channel, subscribed a few years ago. And thank you very much, Justin. He said, question for tomorrow with James. With news of Gary O'Driscoll leaving to join United, I'm wondering why he hasn't been put on gardening leave by the club. In any other industry, an employee leaving to join a rival would mean they'd be put on gardening leave to stop the rival gaining some sort of competitive advantage, especially with current preparations heading new season. Surely we should be trying to protect ourselves a little bit more here. It's a really interesting one.
It's
this is
really good.
I know. I hadn't thought about it at all because all I know is that he's working at the moment an extended notice. I don't know how long that extended notice is. Maybe it's for a season. I don't know, but I doubt it. But yeah, it is a really interesting one. You do see it a lot of times. People are put on gardening leave within football. It's not just in other industries. We see it in football as well. But Arsenal obviously haven't here. Now they've got a really good relationship with Gary O'Driscoll. He's very, very popular. I know for a fact that staff behind the scenes are really upset that he's going. I thought it was interesting in the signing video of was it Declan or was it Jurrien? It was one of them. You know, when Arsenal do the behind the scenes tour and they always go and knock on the doctor's door and Gary's there sitting there and he does the usual, like, you know what to do, you know what to expect and all that. So it wasn't Gary O'Driscoll this time. It was a woman. I wasn't sure who it was. And she called herself the first team doctor, which I thought was quite interesting. So we'll wait and see how long he goes. But I mean, it is interesting. Is that something that you think would it be a concern, or is it just, look, we know Gary, we trust him, he's not gonna give away any of our secrets?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think is it Flo Newton or something like that. And I mean, my first response to this question is one of those ones where you go, I need to go check that. I need to go and ask the question because it's really good, and I hadn't thought to clarify. But like you say, you know, I've spoken to Gary before, met him before at some Arsenal events, and you speak to people who know. I don't think he is the sort of person that would use what he learns in his final few months at Arsenal to help Manchester United, because he's not that sort of guy. I think it's probably the one thing I was thinking is, what does Gary O'Driscoll know that Manchester United can apply and take advantage of when he joins them? Of course, he will have insight into the medical history of Arsenal players, but he is a doctor. You know, there are slightly bigger factors than just anti-competition. That mean he cannot actually share any of the information he might have about any single Arsenal player. You know, this is if you do that, you can't be a doctor anymore. I wish I knew the sort of technical terms for this. My sister is a doctor. She'll kill me that I don't. But, you know, he cannot share that information. He would be struck off, I would assume.
Yeah, it's just an ethical thing, isn't it? It's the whole doctor-patient confidentiality.
Confidentiality. That would be, you know, that I think that's why you can kind of trust him to serve out his notice, to help. It is Flo, I believe, settle in to the new role, and like we say, he's a good guy. He's someone you would want around the club, exploiting for every single day. So yeah, I would assume it is that they can use him and use his qualities because he cannot share any information. Whereas if this was Carlos Cuesta, if this was someone on the business side, yeah, you would be getting them out the door the minute they handed in their notice.
Yeah, well, I mean, Steve Round's gone straight away, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Do you sort of look at those two departures, big departures behind the scenes, and Gary and Steve, and think that is a slight concern? I've been asked this question before. I don't necessarily think it is. Obviously, I know they're two big personalities behind the scenes and big, important people in that coaching setup, but I kind of look at the departure of Steve Round, and I'm not even sure they would necessarily bring in a direct replacement for Steve Round. I think you look at him and Albert, work very well together. And then you've got really good young up and coming coaches who potentially need to be shown there's a pathway to take on extra responsibility to continue that. Otherwise, they'll end up sort of looking elsewhere to continue their development. Have you? When you talked about Carlos Cuesta there, Miguel Molina, those sort of coaches as well. So I don't necessarily look at it and think, oh, he's going to have to go into the market and bring in another coach in that setup.
Specifically because the real indications we got when Steve Round joined was this is about having someone who knows the Premier League like the back of his hand on Arteta's staff at a time when Arteta had never managed a Premier League game before, and Steve Round had sat in the dugout with people like David Moyes and done hundreds, thousands of them. That's not to say that there wasn't still value in Steve Round as Arteta got more experience, but I think Steve knew his purpose. I know you'll know better than me. He broke this story, but it wouldn't shock me if, to an extent, it is kind of just about him wanting something fresh. Arsenal knowing that his most valuable moments are probably in the past. Then with Gary O'Driscoll, that it was kind of remarkable they kept hold of him as long as he did. His family are in the Northwest. Liverpool came calling, and we all remember that video of Arteta at the FA Cup final saying, I told you to have faith. And yeah, Gary O'Driscoll, one of the most admired doctors in the sports industry. That's why he goes on Lions tours. This is a top. I think the big thing is a huge coup for Manchester United. Probably the best bit of business they've done this summer, maybe except Andre Onana. But I think that one is Arsenal did really well to keep him at the club as long as they did.
Mm-hmm. Right, let's move on to one here from Aaron, by the look of it. Aaron. How do you see the team holding up with the width of the pitch? Timber would invert on the right side, and all of our left backs, Zinchenko, Tommy, Kivior, tend to invert. Only White provides an overlapping option. Also on the wings, Saka seems more dangerous in half spaces. Same could be said about Trossard and ESR. Nelson and Martinelli seem to be the only ones comfortable on the wide channels. Is that enough to stretch every opponent and not get stuck in congested central areas when teams stay deep? How could Mikel's tactics overcome this issue? Now, I don't think there's anyone better to have on the channel to answer a question like this than James Benge, who made a career out of tactical pieces with arrows pointing in every single direction. So I'm going to throw this over to you, James Benge. Is this something that Arsenal should be worried about?
I would say Art de Roche is better than me, obviously, but you couldn't get him, I'm sure. It's something again I hadn't thought fully about, but it's worthy of consideration. Look, I don't think that game in, game out, Timber and Zinchenko will invert at the same time. I like that. To me, doesn't seem like how Arteta would. And obviously, the answer partly to this is Ben White. Ben White will overlap a lot. I think there's a little bit of a misconception, even among Arsenal fans, but especially beyond, about what Ben White actually does. He is not a third centre back, with the odd exception. When Arsenal need to hunker down, he is a true right back who bombs on, and actually quite often, Arsenal end up attacking with a front six as much as a front five. White is making the late runs, and that really stretches the pitch. And so does Gabriel Martinelli. He is the width on the left flank. We may well see him interchange with Jesus as well. That Jesus Martinelli pocket, which we probably didn't see as much as we might have expected when Jesus came back from injury. I think with Havertz returning and probably doing those Jacquerie runs right into the center of the pitch, you will see the width on the left side just being a combination of Jesus and Martinelli, and that gives you plenty. It gives you options to get to the byline. The other answer, I suppose, is is Tomiyasu. I'm intrigued as to how he will be used as a left back, because I certainly think we will see a lot of him at left back. He is so two-footed. I think he could, if not invert, then take up a sort of half space level with the penalty area, crossing from there. I mean, crosses off both feet. That again stretches teams. It might not be stretching them to the byline, but it's stretching them forward, opening sort of angles for your Havertz's and your Jesus's. I think it will be there. It's one of the reasons why you can still see an argument for keeping Kieran Tierney around if he'd like to stay, because it doesn't hurt. But then Arteta never ever wants the flying winger down, the flying fullback down the left flank. Even when Tierney was playing, he was sticking, to a inverted Zinchenko style role, and Martinelli was the one bringing all the width. Having Nelson come back and do that, we saw Nelson. The Bournemouth game, kind of what I remember as much as the goal is him getting to the byline every 2 minutes. So I think you'll see a lot of Nelson on the left wing.
Well, that's where the White goal came from, wasn't it? It was Nelson taking it on the byline, crossing it to the back post for White.
I don't think Trossard will. I think he will, if he plays there. I'm sure he will a bit, but I actually see him as more of a false nine option. This is me speculating here. ESR, God knows. I don't really know what Arsenal are thinking with him, and frankly, I'm not sure that ESR knows what Arsenal are thinking with him. I think it will be okay. I think it would be great to have an overlapping left back option, but Arteta doesn't want to use it. So
yeah, I think another important thing is, there's still a long time left of the transfer window at the moment. Obviously Arsenal got 3 players through the door that they wanted. I think the focus very much now is going to switch to getting players out. But should they get the players out that potentially they want to and bring in the type of funds that they want to, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Arsenal dip back into the market between now and the end of the window and look to potentially strengthen in a wide area, specifically on the right hand side, because I still think you look at that sort of competition for Saka, cover for Saka, and it's just still not there. I know Reece has stayed, but I'm sure that Mikel prefers Reece on the left hand side than he does on the right hand side. Same goes for Trossard. Marquinhos will go out on loan. I'm pretty convinced that he's not going to be considered as a backup for Saka. So I still think they could dip into the market and bring in a player who could potentially be a bit of a, more of an out and out right wing option to which you could rotate with. They've been linked to obviously with Kudus. Earlier in the summer, Sammy Mokbel at the Mail wrote a story yesterday, again, sort of hinting at that, saying he's a player that they're looking at potentially after moving some players on. So we'll wait and see if that develops. But do you look at that as an area that Arsenal might still dip into in the market? And if they were to move for Kudus, who isn't really a winger, is he? He doesn't really fit the bill as an out and out winger by any means. But if he was one of the players they sort of were looking at, would you think that would be a potentially good signing?
I think Kudus would be a great signing. Like you say, I think when we all heard his name, and I know you and I both, I think, reported on his name earlier in the summer, I was under the impression it was to be more of an 8. And I know that's a role he's played at Ajax, but he does also play on the right wing, and he did last season to really good effect. It's this funny thing. Obviously, I don't watch the Eredivisie. I know a lot of people on Twitter and on YouTube would want you to think they watch 40 games a day. But I did see quite a bit of him in the group stages of the Champions League, because that was that brilliant group they were in with Napoli and Liverpool.
Yeah.
Like the incision, when I think back to what I saw, a player that comes off the wing and attacks, you see something Saka-ish about it. It's always going to be such a challenge. Bukayo Saka is going to be a bit like Arsenal's Harry Kane, we hope. Although hopefully when he signs a 6-year contract, he'll actually want to be there for all 6 years. He's always going to be someone that, if you try and sign, the pitch is always going to be, well, yes, you probably aren't getting in the team over Bukayo Saka. And yes, Saka will always have more leeway, and Saka will always be the guy for this era of Arsenal. At least that's the hope. So I think what you need to find then is someone that you can say, look, you'll play some games coming in for Saka, and you will play some games coming in for Ødegaard or Havertz, and you'll play some, frankly, coming in for Gabriel Jesus. I think he's even played striker. So Kudus specifically like ticks the boxes of what I would want from a Saka alternative, in that I feel he's high quality, but you can give him games elsewhere. So
Yeah, and he
I
does
like
fit,
it.
he fits the profile that Arsenal want. I mean, we pretty much know now that Arsenal wouldn't sign a player who can just play in one position. I mean, it's just not what Mikel Arteta wants. He wants a player who can move around and be versatile. It's just right up there. And Kudus is exactly that. Like you said, he can play in a number of positions. He's the perfect age for an Arsenal signing. So it's going to be definitely interesting to sort of keep our eyes on that one to see if it does progress a little bit later on in the window. Arsenal should have pretty good relations with Ajax, given what they've just done with Timber. Right, this is the last one. Now, this is one I answered yesterday, but because as I started doing it, I realised that it was actually to both of us, because I told people to send in some questions for both of us. So, and I realised too late. So I actually answered it yesterday, which was a pretty rubbish answer as well, because I basically fudged the whole issue. And I think it's really difficult to answer, because the Invincibles, as good as Saka is, as good as Saliba is, it's very hard to compare the eras, and I just don't think you can touch the Invincibles. They just stay the same. That's why they were so successful. I'm sure they're good enough to play in that team, but I still wouldn't pick any other player to go into that team, because that team was just so special. But I don't know if you would change your opinion on that. What are your thoughts when you look at this question about whether any of these players could get into the Invincibles? And if you're not watching this on YouTube, it's Saliba for Colo, Rice for Gilberto, Saka for Freddie. And I absolutely agree here. Lauren, as I said yesterday, one of the most underrated players in the Premier League era. To be honest, he was that good.
Yeah, I mean, I do immediately start with that, like the same thought that you have. And look, I was 13, 14 in the Invincibles season, so it's going to take quite some. That's when football peaked for me. It's when my childhood peaked. It's when everything peaks, when you're 13, 14. So it's a tough sell. And like my immediate response is, I don't want to break up the Invincibles. Keep that band together. And I think we forget that. I've seen better midfielders than Gilberto Silva in an Arsenal shirt, but I don't think I've seen anyone where playing next to them, Patrick Vieira was better than Gilberto Silva. Than he was when he played next to Gilberto Silva. He was so quietly effective, and he freed Patrick to be everywhere all at once. Colo as well. Saliba's a better player, and by God, Saliba could be entering, if he wants to spend his whole career at Arsenal, he could be in the pantheon alongside Sol Campbell, Tony Adams, great Arsenal centre backs, David O'Leary. But I don't desperately want to split them up. And the one that I always find so hard is taking out Freddie Ljungberg. I know it was maybe a bit after the peak of his powers in that.
Yeah, 2002 was prime Freddie, but it's 2004.
It's Freddie Ljungberg.
No.
Like, he is in some ways, we think, and Vieira is obviously the prime example of an ultimate Arsene Wenger signing. But this is a guy we found from Sweden, and I don't know about you, I still remember the goal he scored against Manchester United, and I was a lot younger then. I'd never heard of the guy before he scored that goal against Manchester United. I don't want to break that up. If I'm then like taking emotion out of it, I would probably agree that you bring Saliba in for Toure. Yeah, you bring Saka in, don't you, for Ljungberg? I'm not having Rice over Gilberto, and I'm 100% not having Ben White over Lauren. I think Lauren was exceptional. The thing is, as well, I would love to see Lauren in a 2023 Arsenal. He'd be a really good inverting fullback, don't you think? I'd almost love to give Arteta, who obviously is not managing this team, but give him these players, or introduce them to the world of football in 2023, where opponents are maybe a bit more tactically versatile. And what would you do with these guys in the modern age? I'd love to see it. So yeah, I'm never one to break up the band, but you have to say probably Saliba.
I don't know. The Toure was so good that year. Him and Count, he was so fast. His recovery was unbelievable. He just used to get back and rescue situations with his pace. He was, such a good player, Kolo Toure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'd be putting Saliba in there yet. As good as Saliba is, and he is brilliant. I thought Toure, especially in that season, was just remarkable next to Sol Campbell. So, but it's such an impossible one to answer, really, just because it's two very different eras, and I just don't think. I think the Invincibles worked because of the partnerships they had in that team, and I think would throwing in one of those players, would that have disrupted things? I don't know, but like you said, I'm sure they're all good enough to have been in and around that team. But yeah, I'm going to stay on the fence like I was on yesterday, and refrain from giving an outright opinion on that one. Look, we're coming up to an hour now, James. We are 25 minutes away from the first ball at Old Trafford, so wrapped it up nice and well. Thank you very much for joining me as always, and for everyone watching this. You're gonna have a few weeks sort of hiatus, but this is a kind of partnership on this channel that you're going to see more and more of as the season.
I was wondering if we were going to hint at that.
Yes, as the season progresses, myself and James got some plans to link up and do some good episodes, shows.
The next regular Vieira and Gilberto, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh God, who's which? Who's which? I'm Patrick there. I'm definitely.
I'll clean up your mess.
I'm calling rank there. All right. So yeah, be prepared after both of us are back from holidays, which are both taking very, very soon. Then you're going to see more and more of this partnership going forward as we discuss all things Arsenal throughout the season. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Again, James, thanks for joining me, mate. Have a very good day, and everyone watching and listening to this around the world, have a great day as well. And if you are one of the few who are going to stay up late and watch the All-Stars game, or if you're in America and you're watching it, enjoy it. Hopefully get a good first sight of Declan Rice in that frankly horrendous Arsenal shirt. Have a great day, everyone. Speak to you soon.